Victoria Sterling's voice cut through the office like a blade. "Hannah Brooks, pack your things. You're fired." The words hung in the air, impossibly heavy. Around them, the 20th floor of Sterling and Associates fell completely silent. Keyboards stopped mid-click, phone conversations died, even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to pause. Hannah looked up from her desk, her heart stopping in her chest. What? The question came out as barely a whisper. Victoria stood over Hannah's desk like an executioner, her perfectly styled blonde hair and designer suit radiating cold authority. Her lips curved into something that might have been a smile if there was any warmth behind it. "The Henderson file. You leaked confidential information to their competitors. We have proof." Victoria's voice carried across the silent office, ensuring everyone heard the accusation. "Security will escort you out. Don't bother asking for a reference. Your career in this city is over." Hannah's hands started trembling. 7 years. 7 years of arriving early, staying late, doing everything with meticulous care. At 32, she'd built a reputation as the most reliable secretary in the building, never missed a deadline, never forgot a detail, never complained about the extra hours. And now, in 30 seconds, it was all gone. "That's not true," Hannah managed, her voice cracking. "I would never—" "Save it." Victoria was already turning away, her heels clicking against the polished floor. "Security!" The Seattle skyline stretched beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the November morning light painting the glass towers in shades of silver and gold. It should have been a beautiful day. Hannah had worn her navy blazer and white blouse, had her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, had arrived at 6 a.m. to get ahead on the Morrison contract. Everything about her spoke of professionalism and quiet competence. None of it mattered now. None of it mattered now. "Hannah, wait!" Jennifer's voice came from somewhere to her left, but Hannah barely heard it over the rushing sound in her ears. A security guard appeared, young, uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact. "Ms. Brooks, I need you to gather your personal items and come with me." Hannah's hands shook as she reached for her desk drawer. The photo of her mother. The small succulent plant her nephew had given her last Christmas. The coffee mug he'd made in art class, painted with crooked letters that said, "Best Aunt Ever." She placed each item into a cardboard box that materialized from somewhere, her movements mechanical, disconnected from her body. The walk to the elevator felt like miles. Every eye in the office watching, some with pity, others with curiosity, a few with barely concealed satisfaction. Hannah kept her head down, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other, on breathing through the tightness in her chest, on not crying until she was outside. The elevator doors closed on her reflection, a woman whose carefully built life had just shattered. What Hannah didn't see was the man standing at the window on the executive floor above. Lee Tai-yang watched her emerge from the building 3 stories below, her shoulders hunched against the cold wind, carrying everything she owned from 7 years of work in a single cardboard box. His hand tightened on the window frame. 20 years. It had been 20 years since that day in Portland, since a 12-year-old girl with kind eyes had saved his father's life. He'd never forgotten her face, had spent years searching for her, had finally given up hope of ever seeing her again. And now here she was, and someone had just destroyed her world. "David," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving Hannah's retreating figure. His assistant stepped forward immediately. "Find out everything about Hannah Brooks, where she lives, her background, her family, everything." "Sir, she was just terminated for corporate espionage. The evidence—" "I don't care about their evidence." Tae-Yang's voice was cold, controlled, the tone that made executives twice his age nervous. "I want to know about her, and I want to know who really leaked that information. Get our IT forensics team on this, now." David hesitated only a moment before bowing. "Yes, sir." Tae-Yang remained at the window long after Hannah had disappeared from view. At 35, he was heir to Hansjong Group, one of Korea's largest conglomerates. He'd come to Seattle to oversee the acquisition of Sterling and Associates, a strategic purchase to expand their American operations. He'd expected a routine business transaction. He hadn't expected to find the girl who'd changed his life 2 decades ago. The memory came rushing back with perfect clarity. Tai Yang had been 15, visiting America for the first time with his father. They'd been walking through the streets of Portland when everything went wrong. His father had collapsed, a heart attack, sudden and terrifying. Young Tai Yang had been frozen with panic, unable to speak English well enough to call for help, watching his father's face turn pale. Then a girl had appeared. She couldn't have been more than 12, with dark hair and eyes that held no fear despite the crisis unfolding before her. She'd immediately called 911, her voice steady and clear, then knelt beside his father and held his hand, speaking gently to him until the ambulance arrived. "You're going to be okay," she told Tai Yang in that moment, her English slow and careful so he could understand. "I promise. Help is coming." His father had survived. But in the chaos that followed, the hospital, the recovery, the return to Seoul, Tai Yang had never gotten her name. He'd tried to find her, spent years searching through records and hiring investigators, but it had been impossible. Portland was a big city, and he'd only known her first name, Hannah. Now, she was here. And someone had just destroyed her life. Tai Yang turned from the window, his expression hardening. "David, I want you to investigate this supposed evidence against Hannah Brooks, every detail. And I want to know who really leaked that information." "Sir, are you sure?" "Now," Tai Yang said quietly, but the steel in his voice was unmistakable. Hannah sat in her small apartment in the Fremont neighborhood, staring at the box of her belongings on the coffee table. The apartment was modest but cozy, one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living room with windows that overlooked a small park. She'd lived here for 5 years, always paying her rent on time, always keeping it clean and organized. Now, she didn't know how she'd afford next month's rent. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. "I'm so sorry. Everyone knows this is wrong. Hang in there." Hannah's eyes filled with tears. She'd worked so hard, been so careful. How could this happen? A knock on the door startled her. She wiped her eyes and stood up, her legs unsteady. Through the peephole, she saw a man in an expensive suit, his dark hair styled impeccably, his posture radiating wealth and power. She opened the door cautiously, leaving the chain lock engaged. "Can I help you?" "Hannah Brooks?" the man asked in accented English. His voice was deep and calm. "Yes? My name is Lee Tai Yang. I'm the new owner of Sterling & Associates. May I come in? I'd like to discuss your termination." Hannah's breath caught. The new owner? Why would he be at her door? "I don't understand," she said, her voice wary. "Mrs. Sterling already fired me. There's nothing to discuss." "Please," Tai Yang said, and something in his eyes made her hesitate. There was no threat there, no coldness, just an intensity that felt almost familiar. "I believe you were wrongly accused. I'd like to help you prove it." Hannah's hand trembled on the doorknob. After a long moment, she slid the chain free and opened the door. Tai Yang stepped inside, and as their eyes met in the better light of her apartment, something flickered across his face. Recognition, wonder, and something Hannah couldn't quite identify. "Have we met before?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. Tai Yang's lips curved into the smallest hint of a smile. "Yes, a long time ago. But first, let's talk about clearing your name." The next morning, Hannah found herself in a conference room at Sterling & Associates, sitting across from Tai Yang and a team of investigators. The room was cold, both in temperature and atmosphere. The large windows offered a view of Elliott Bay, where ferries moved slowly across the gray water. "The evidence against you consists of 3 emails sent from your computer," David Kim explained, sliding printouts across the table. "Each one contains confidential information about the Henderson merger." Hannah leaned forward, studying the emails, her stomach twisted. "These are from my computer, but I didn't send them. I've never even seen these emails before." "The timestamps show they were sent after hours," David continued, "when you were the only one in the office, according to security logs." "I do stay late," Hannah admitted, her voice quiet. "But I've never accessed files I wasn't authorized to see. And I would never betray the company." Tai Yang had been silent, watching her with those dark, intense eyes. Now he spoke. "Who else has access to your computer?" Hannah hesitated. "Technically, anyone with administrative access could log in remotely. IT, senior management, and Mrs. Sterling has the master passwords for all employee computers." A meaningful look passed between Tae Yang and David. "Mrs. Sterling has been quite vocal about wanting you removed," David said carefully. "According to other employees we've interviewed, she's made several negative comments about you over the past few months." Hannah looked down at her hands. "She doesn't like me. I don't know why. I've always been professional with her." "Some people don't need a reason," Tae Yang said quietly. "They simply enjoy having power over others." The investigation took 3 days. Tae Yang's team of IT specialists tore through the company's systems with ruthless efficiency. What they found confirmed what Tae Yang had suspected from the beginning. Hannah was sitting in a small cafe near Pike Place Market, nursing a coffee she could barely afford, when her phone rang. Tae Yang's number. "Hello?" she answered, her voice uncertain. "It's over," Tae Yang said. "The emails were sent remotely from Mrs. Sterling's home IP address. She framed you. We have proof." Hannah's hand tightened on her phone. The relief was so intense it made her dizzy. "Why? Why would she do that?" "Jealousy, according to what we've uncovered. Her husband made comments about your competence, apparently suggesting she could learn from your work ethic. Mrs. Sterling decided to eliminate the perceived threat." Hannah closed her eyes. Something so petty had nearly destroyed her entire life. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now, you have choices," Tae Yang replied. "Mrs. Sterling is being removed from any involvement with the company. You can return to your position at Sterling & Associates with a formal apology and compensation for damages. Or..." He paused. "Or?" Hannah prompted. "Or you can consider a different opportunity, one I'd like to discuss with you in person." They met that evening at an upscale restaurant in downtown Seattle. Hannah had changed into the one nice dress she owned, a simple black sheath that had served her through countless professional events. She felt out of place in the restaurant's elegant atmosphere, where soft lighting and quiet classical music created an ambiance of refined wealth. Tae Yang was already there, seated at a private table by the window. He stood when she arrived, and Hannah noticed the way other diners glanced at him. This man who commanded attention simply by existing. "Thank you for coming," he said, pulling out her chair. "Thank you for clearing my name," Hannah replied, sitting down. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." "You already did," Tae Yang said quietly. 20 years ago." Hannah frowned. "I'm sorry, I don't understand." Tae Yang leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "Portland, 20 years ago. A man collapsed on the street, a heart attack. His teenage son was with him, terrified and unable to communicate, and a 12-year-old girl stopped to help." The memory hit Hannah like a physical blow. She'd been walking home from school, had seen the man fall, had seen the scared boy trying desperately to help his father. She'd called 911, stayed with them until the ambulance arrived, held the man's hand, and told him to keep breathing. "That was you?" she whispered. "That was me," Tae Yang confirmed. "You saved my father's life, and you gave me hope in the worst moment of my life." Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "I never knew what happened. The ambulance took you away and I just went home. My mom asked why I was late, and I told her I'd stopped to help someone. She was proud of me." "Your mother," Tae Yang said. "Tell me about her." The question opened a floodgate. Hannah found herself talking about her mom, about growing up in a small house in Portland, about the way her mother had worked 2 jobs to support them after Hannah's father left, about the way her mom had always taught her to help others, to be kind, to do the right thing even when it was hard. "She passed away 3 years ago," Hannah said quietly. "Cancer. By the end, I was taking care of her. That's why I moved to Seattle. I needed a fresh start after she was gone." "I'm sorry," Tae Yang said, and the sympathy in his voice was genuine. "She raised a remarkable daughter." They talked through dinner, the conversation flowing more easily than Hannah would have thought possible with someone so far above her station. Tae-young told her about returning to Korea, about the pressure of being groomed to take over Hansyoung Group, about the way his father had never forgotten the kind American girl who had saved his life. "He tried to find you," Tae-young said. "We both did. But we only knew your first name, and Portland is a big city." "And now fate brought us together," Hannah said, then laughed nervously. "Sorry, that sounds like something from a drama." "Maybe life is more dramatic than we give it credit for," Tae-young replied, a hint of a smile on his lips. As the evening drew to a close, Tae-young returned to the subject of her future. "I have a proposal for you. Not your old job back. Something different." Hannah waited, her heart beating faster. "I need an executive assistant. Someone I can trust absolutely. Someone who understands both American and Korean business cultures, who can manage complex situations with discretion and intelligence." He paused. The position would be based here in Seattle, but would involve occasional travel to Korea. The compensation would be substantial. Hannah's breath caught. "Why me? You barely know me. I know that you stopped to help a stranger when you were 12 years old. I know that you worked 7 years with impeccable integrity. I know that you faced false accusations with dignity." Tae-young's eyes met hers. "And I know that I've been searching for you for 20 years. I'm not letting chance slip away twice." "I don't know what to say," Hannah whispered. "Say you'll think about it," Tae-young replied. "No pressure. Take all the time you need." But as Hannah looked into his eyes, saw the sincerity there, she realized she'd already made her decision. "Yes," she said. "I don't need time to think. Yes." The first month working for Tae-young was overwhelming in the best possible way. Hannah found herself thrust into a world she'd only glimpsed from the outside. High-stakes negotiations, international business deals, meetings with executives whose decisions moved millions of dollars with a single signature. Tae-young's Seattle office was located in Columbia Center, the tallest building in the city. The entire top floor belonged to Hansyoung Group's American operations, and Hannah's desk sat just outside Tae-young's office, where she could manage his schedule, screen his calls, and handle the 1,000 daily details that kept his empire running smoothly. "You're a natural at this," David Kim commented one afternoon, watching Hannah juggle 3 phone calls while simultaneously reviewing a contract. "Most people would have collapsed by week 2. "I'm just organized," Hannah replied, finishing the 3rd call and making a note about the contract's terms. "And I had a good teacher." She meant her mother, but as the words left her mouth, she realized they applied to Tae-young as well. He was demanding but never cruel, expected excellence but was patient when she was learning something new. He remembered details about her life, asked about her nephew who'd made the coffee mug, never made her feel like just an employee. 3 weeks into the job, on a particularly hectic Friday, everything went wrong at once. The video conference system failed during a crucial meeting with the Seoul headquarters. A major client threatened to pull out of a deal, and Hannah accidentally spilled coffee all over an important document. She stared at the coffee-stained paper, feeling tears of frustration prick her eyes. It was after 7 p.m., everyone else had gone home, and she was exhausted after a 12-hour day. "Hannah?" Tae-young's voice made her look up. He stood in his office doorway, his tie loosened and his expression concerned. "What's wrong?" "I ruined the Henderson contracts," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I'll stay and print new ones. "Hey," Tae-young said softly, crossing to her desk. "It's just paper. We have digital copies. It's fine. But I should be more careful. You should go home," Tae-young interrupted gently. "You've been here since 6 this morning." "Come on, I'll drive you." "You don't have to." "Hannah." He smiled, and the warmth in it made her chest tighten. "Let me do this." The drive to her apartment took 20 minutes through Seattle's evening traffic. Tae-young drove a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than Hannah had earned in the past 3 years combined. The silence between them was comfortable, punctuated only by the soft sound of rain beginning to fall against the windshield. "Can I ask you something?" Hannah said as they neared her neighborhood. "Of course." Why did you really come to my door that day? You could have just sent someone to clear my name. You didn't have to get personally involved. Tae-yang was quiet for a long moment. Because I owed you a debt I could never repay. And because I wanted to see if you were the same person I remembered. And am I? Hannah asked softly. He pulled up in front of her building and turned to look at her. The streetlights cast shadows across his face, but his eyes were clear and direct. You're even better than I remembered. Hannah's breath caught. There was something in the air between them, something electric and terrifying and wonderful all at once. Thank you for the ride, she managed to say, reaching for the door handle. Hannah, Tae-yang said, and she paused. Have dinner with me tomorrow, not business, just us. She should say no. He was her boss. There were 1,000 reasons this was complicated. But when she looked at him, all she could see was the scared 15-year-old boy who'd watched his father collapse and the man who'd fought to clear her name when everyone else had turned away. Okay, she whispered. Yes. Their first real date was at a small Korean restaurant in the International District, tucked between a Vietnamese PHO shop and a Chinese herb store. The kind of place where elderly Korean women shouted orders from the kitchen, and the menu was handwritten in both Korean and English with varying degrees of accuracy. Tae-yang held the door for Hannah, and the scent of garlic, sesame oil, and fermenting kimchi washed over them. It was nothing like the upscale restaurant where they'd first met. This was warm, loud, chaotic, real. I wanted you to try real Korean food, he explained as they slid into a worn booth with cracked vinyl seats. Not the fusion stuff they serve at trendy restaurants downtown. This. He gestured around at the family-run chaos. This is what I grew up with. The owner, a tiny woman who barely reached Hannah's shoulder, arrived with a torrent of rapid-fire Korean directed at Tae-yang. He responded in kind, and Hannah caught enough to understand they were discussing what to order. The woman's eyes kept darting to Hannah with open curiosity. When she finally left, Tae-yang smiled apologetically. She wanted to know if you're my girlfriend. I told her yes. I hope that's okay. If I'd said anything else, she would have spent the entire meal trying to set me up with her daughter. Hannah laughed, feeling her cheeks warm. Quick thinking. The food came in waves, small dishes covering every inch of the table until Hannah couldn't see the surface anymore. Kimchi in 6 varieties, pickled radishes, seasoned bean sprouts, fish cakes, spinach banchan, and then the main courses. Bubbling stone pots of kimchi jjigae, a sizzling platter of bulgogi, perfectly grilled mackerel, steamed egg that wobbled like custard. There's no way we can eat all this, Hannah said, overwhelmed. You're not supposed to, Tae-yang explained, already filling her bowl with rice and stew. This is how Korean mothers show love, by giving you more food than you could possibly consume. My Iyama, my mother, she's the same way. When I visit Seoul, she cooks for 3 days straight, convinced I'm starving in America, despite the fact that I own 6 restaurants. Hannah picked up her chopsticks, then paused, watching how Tae-yang mixed his rice with the stew, how he picked up the banchan with practiced ease, how he used the spoon for soup and chopsticks for everything else. I'm going to embarrass myself, aren't I? She asked. Probably, he said with a grin. But that's part of the charm. Here. He reached over, his fingers guiding hers to adjust her chopstick grip. His touch was gentle, patient. Like this. And don't worry about making noise when you eat the soup. In Korea, it's actually polite. Shows you're enjoying it. Hannah tried the kimchi jjigae first. The spice hit her immediately, not just heat, but layers of flavor, fermented, funky, rich, with pork belly that melted on her tongue and tofu that had absorbed all the soup's essence. Her eyes watered. Oh my God, she gasped, reaching for water. Wow, that's really spicy. Tae-yang's eyes crinkled with amusement as he pushed the water closer. We have a saying in Korea, good kimchi should make you cry a little. The tears mean it's working. It's working, Hannah confirmed, but she was already reaching for another spoonful. It's incredible. It's like, I don't even know how to describe this. It's spicy, but also tangy and sweet and savory all at once. That's gochugaru, Korean chili flakes, and fermentation and fish sauce, and about 20 other things that my grandmother would insist can't be replicated outside of her specific clay pots that have been fermenting kimchi for 40 years. He scooped some bulgogi onto her rice. Try this. It's less aggressive. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the sounds of the restaurant filling the gaps, Korean soap operas playing on a TV in the corner, the owner yelling at her husband in the kitchen, the sizzle of meat on the grill. Tell me about your father, Hannah said eventually. Not the business parts you mentioned at the office, the real parts. Taeyang set down his chopsticks, considering his words carefully. He was, complicated. In public, he was this intimidating figure, CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, man who made decisions that affected thousands of people. But at home, he was different. He collected vintage cameras. Terrible at using them, mind you, every photo slightly out of focus, but he loved the mechanics of it, how they worked. He'd spend hours taking apart old film cameras and putting them back together. His voice softened. After Portland, after the heart attack, he changed. Became gentler somehow. Started actually talking to me instead of just instructing. He'd take me to these small restaurants like this one, places where nobody knew who he was, where we could just be a father and son eating jjajangmyeon and arguing about football. He told me once that almost dying taught him that power meant nothing if you couldn't use it to make someone else's day better. Taeyang looked directly at Hannah. He spent years looking for you, you know. Hired private investigators, contacted every hospital in Portland, even put ads in local newspapers. He wanted to thank you properly, wanted to make sure you understood that what you did mattered. That 12-year-old Hannah saw a crisis and didn't look away, didn't assume someone else would handle it, didn't hesitate because we were strangers. And that, his voice caught slightly. That changed everything for him. Changed everything for me too, watching how you took charge, how calm you stayed. I thought, that's what courage actually looks like. Not loud or showy, just present, doing what needs to be done. Hannah's throat was tight. I wish I could have known him, the real him. He would have loved you. Taeyang smiled. Probably would have embarrassed me thoroughly by showing you my middle school photos and telling you stories about me crying at piano recitals. He had this way of making sure I stayed humble. Every time I got too confident, he'd remind me of something ridiculous I'd done. I want to hear those stories, Hannah said. Then I guess we'll need more dates, Taeyang replied, and the hope in his voice was unmistakable. The words hung in the air between them. Hannah looked up and found him watching her with an expression that made her heart race. Intensity, yes, but also tenderness, vulnerability, hope. Taeyang, she began, but wasn't sure what to say. I know this is complicated, he said quietly. I'm your boss. There are professional boundaries. There are cultural differences between us. But I can't pretend I don't feel something. I've felt it since the moment I saw you again. Me too, Hannah admitted. I tried not to. I told myself it was just gratitude or professional respect, but it's more than that, Taeyang finished. It's more than that, she agreed. He reached across the table, and after a moment's hesitation, Hannah placed her hand in his. His fingers were warm, his grip gentle but firm. Then let's see where this goes, he said. No pressure, no expectations, just see. Hannah smiled, feeling something inside her chest that felt like hope, like possibility, like the beginning of something she'd never dared to dream of. Okay, she whispered. Let's see. The next 3 months were unlike anything Hannah had ever experienced. She and Taeyang developed a rhythm, professional during work hours, carefully maintaining boundaries in the office, but spending evenings and weekends getting to know each other in ways that had nothing to do with business. He took her to a concert at Benaroya Hall, where they listened to the Seattle Symphony perform Rachmaninoff. She introduced him to her favorite bookstore on Capitol Hill, where they spent a Saturday afternoon browsing and arguing good-naturedly about literature. He taught her basic Korean phrases. She helped him understand American cultural references he'd missed. What do you mean you've never seen Star Wars? Hannah asked one evening, mock scandalized. I was busy learning to run a multi-billion-dollar company, Taeyang replied dryly. That's no excuse. We're fixing this immediately. They had movie marathons in her small apartment, Tae Yang looking adorably out of place on her secondhand couch, eating microwave popcorn and watching sci-fi classics. They had late-night conversations in his penthouse, where the view stretched across the entire city, about dreams and fears and the future. "My family expects me to marry a Korean woman from a good family," Tai Yang told her one night, his voice quiet. They were sitting on his balcony, the city lights twinkling below like earthbound stars. "Someone who understands the culture, who can help maintain the company's image in Korea." Hannah's chest tightened. "And what do you want?" He turned to look at her, and the expression in his eyes was answer enough. "I want you, but I need to be honest about what that means. My family will object. The Korean business community will talk. It won't be easy." "I never expected easy," Hannah said softly. "But I need to know. Are you willing to fight for this? Because I can handle anything except being someone's secret." Tai Yang took her hand, bringing it to his lips. "I won't make you a secret. I promise you that." It was a promise he would be tested on sooner than either of them expected. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Hannah was reviewing contracts when Tai Yang's private line rang, the one that only his family in Korea could access. She heard his voice change as he answered, watched his entire demeanor shift. The conversation was in Korean, rapid and tense. When he hung up, his face was carefully neutral, but Hannah could see the tension in his shoulders. "My mother is coming to Seattle," he said. "She arrives tomorrow." Hannah's stomach dropped. "Because of me?" "Because she's heard rumors. Someone on the Seoul board saw photos of us at the symphony. They mentioned it to her." He ran a hand through his hair, a rare show of stress. "She wants to meet you." "Maybe I shouldn't—" "No." Tae Yang's voice was firm. "I meant what I said. You're not going to be hidden. But I need you to understand what you're walking into. My mother is formidable. She has very specific expectations for her son's future wife." "I'm sure I'm not what she's expecting," Hannah said, trying to keep her voice light. "No," Tae Yang agreed. "You're better." The meeting was arranged for dinner at Tai Yang's penthouse. Hannah spent an hour choosing her outfit, finally settling on a simple but elegant navy dress. She arrived 15 minutes early, her stomach a knot of nerves. Tae Yang opened the door, and the warmth in his eyes when he saw her helped steady her racing heart. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "I look terrified," Hannah replied. "That too." He smiled and took her hand. "But you don't need to be. Just be yourself. That's all I need." Kim Soo-jin arrived exactly on time, as Hannah had expected. Tai Yang's mother was a striking woman in her early 60s, wearing a designer hanbok that somehow managed to be both traditional and modern. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo, her posture perfect, her expression carefully neutral. "Mother," Tae Yang said in English, "this is Hannah Brooks. Hannah, my mother, Kim Soo-jin." "It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Kim," Hannah said, bowing slightly as Tae Yang had taught her. "Thank you for coming." Soo-jin's eyes swept over Hannah, assessing, calculating. "My son speaks very highly of you," she said, her English accented but flawless. "He says you saved his father's life." "I just called for help," Hannah replied. "Anyone would have done the same." "But most people don't," Soo-jin observed. "Most people walk by." Dinner was an exercise in careful diplomacy. Soo-jin asked questions about Hannah's family, her education, her career goals, with the precision of a surgeon. Hannah answered honestly, refusing to pretend to be something she wasn't. "My mother was a waitress," Hannah said when asked about her family background. "She raised me alone after my father left. She worked hard to give me opportunities she never had." "And you have no college degree," Soo-jin stated. "No," Hannah admitted. "I couldn't afford university. I started working right after high school." "Yet my son made you his executive assistant. That requires education, surely." "It requires competence," Tae Yang interjected, his voice calm but firm. "Which Hannah has in abundance." Soo-jin's eyes flickered to her son, then back to Hannah. "You must understand that this is unusual." In Korea, family background matters. Education matters. A woman in your position would never be considered suitable for a man of Taeyang's standing. The words stung, but Hannah kept her expression steady. I understand that, Mrs. Kim. I'm not trying to be suitable. I'm just trying to be honest about who I am. And who are you? Soo-jin asked, the question sharp. Hannah took a breath. I'm someone who believes in working hard, who tries to be kind, who loves your son and wants to support him in building the life he wants, not just the life expected of him. The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Then Soo-jin set down her teacup with a soft click. At least you're honest, she said. That's more than I can say for most people who would chase my son for his money. Mother, Taeyang said, warning in his voice, but Soo-jin held up a hand. I'm not finished. She looked at Hannah with those sharp, assessing eyes. I don't approve of this relationship. I think it will bring difficulty to my son's life, complications he doesn't need as he prepares to take over the company. But I also know my son. He's stubborn, like his father. He makes up his mind and nothing changes it. She stood up, and Hannah and Taeyang rose as well. If you're going to do this, Soo-jin said, directing her words to both of them, then you must be prepared. The board and Seoul will object. There will be pressure on Taeyang to end this. His position may even be threatened if he doesn't comply with family expectations. I would never want to hurt his career, Hannah said quietly. Then leave now, Soo-jin said bluntly, before it goes any further. Mother! Taeyang's voice was sharp, but Soo-jin continued, looking only at Hannah. If you truly love my son, you should consider what's best for him, not what makes you happy. The words hung in the air like a challenge, like a curse. Hannah felt her eyes burning with unshed tears, but she forced herself to meet Soo-jin's gaze directly. What's best for your son, Hannah said, her voice quiet but steady, is being with someone who loves him for who he is, not what he represents. Someone who will support his dreams, not just his obligations. And that's what I try to be. Something flickered in Soo-jin's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or grudging respect. She gave a small nod. We'll see, she said. And then she was gone, leaving Hannah and Taeyang alone in the suddenly quiet penthouse. The moment the door closed behind his mother, Hannah felt her composure crumble. She sank onto the couch, her hands shaking. That was a disaster, she whispered. Taeyang sat beside her, pulling her into his arms. That was you being magnificent, he corrected. You stood your ground. You were honest. You were everything I knew you would be. She hates me. She's afraid, Taeyang said. Afraid of change, afraid of losing control over my life, afraid of what my choosing you means for the family's carefully planned future. He tilted Hannah's face up to meet his eyes. But I meant what I said. I'm not making you a secret, and I'm not giving you up. Even if it costs you everything? Hannah asked, her voice breaking. You're not asking me to choose, Taeyang said firmly. She is. And I choose you. Every time, I choose you. The next week brought the storm Soo-jin had predicted. The board in Seoul demanded a meeting via video conference. Hannah sat outside Taeyang's office, able to hear raised voices through the door, angry Korean mixed with sharp English demands. When Taeyang emerged 3 hours later, he looked exhausted. What did they say? Hannah asked, afraid of the answer. They want me to end our relationship. They've made it clear that if I continue seeing you, they'll consider replacing me as heir to the company. His voice was flat, emotionless, the tone he used when he was barely holding himself together. Hannah felt her world tilt. Everything Taeyang had worked for, his entire life's purpose, threatened because of her. Then we'll end it, she said, the words tearing out of her throat like broken glass. I won't let you lose everything because of me. Hannah. No, please. She was crying now, unable to stop the tears. Your father built that company. Your whole family depends on you. I can't be the reason you lose all of that. I can't. Taeyang crossed to her in 2 strides, gripping her shoulders. Look at me, he commanded. and she raised her tear-stained face. I don't care about the company if it means losing you. You can't mean that. I can, and I do. His voice was fierce. Do you know what I learned the day my father collapsed? That all the money, all the power, all the prestige means nothing if you're alone. He told me that afterward when he recovered. He said that the only thing he thought about when he couldn't breathe was that he'd spent his whole life building an empire and had forgotten to really live. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. You taught me how to live, Hannah. First when we were kids, showing me that there's still kindness in the world, and now, reminding me every day that there's more to life than obligations and expectations. But the company will survive whether I lead it or not, Tae-yang said. But I won't survive losing you, not again. Hannah wanted to believe him, wanted to let herself hope, but the weight of what he would be giving up crushed her. I need time, she whispered. I need to think. Something like pain flashed across Tae-yang's face, but he nodded. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. Hannah left early that day, claiming illness. She walked through Pike Place Market, not seeing the crowds or the vendors, her mind spinning. How could she let Tae-yang sacrifice everything for her? But how could she walk away from the best thing that had ever happened to her? She ended up at the waterfront, staring out at the gray waters of Puget Sound. The wind was cold, carrying the scent of salt and rain. She thought about her mother, about what advice she would give. Her mom had always said that love was a choice, not just a feeling, a choice you made every day to put someone else first. But what did putting someone first mean in this situation? Leaving to protect his future, or staying to support him in choosing his own path? Her phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. Turn on the news. You need to see this. Confused, Hannah pulled up a news app on her phone. The headline made her heart stop. Hansyoung Group heir makes shocking announcement. I choose love over dynasty. Below was a video. Hannah clicked it with trembling fingers. The footage showed Tae-yang standing before a crowd of reporters in Seoul. He must have taken an emergency flight the moment she'd left the office. His expression was calm, determined, the face of a man who had made an irrevocable decision. I've called this press conference to address rumors about my personal life, Tae-yang said in Korean, English subtitles appearing below. It's true that I'm in a relationship with someone who doesn't fit the traditional expectations for a future chairman's wife. It's also true that the Hansong board has objected to this relationship. He paused, and the camera zoomed in on his face. I want to be very clear about my position. I respect my family and the company my father built. But I will not sacrifice my personal happiness for corporate politics. The woman I love saved my father's life when she was 12 years old. She's shown me what true integrity looks like, and I will not turn my back on her to satisfy outdated traditions. The reporters erupted in questions, but Tae-yang continued speaking. If the board chooses to remove me as heir, that's their decision. I'll accept it. But I will not end my relationship with Hannah Brooks. Some things are more important than money or power. She taught me that a long time ago, and I'm finally wise enough to listen. The video ended. Hannah stood frozen on the waterfront, tears streaming down her face. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. Chosen her in front of the entire Korean business world, risked everything he'd worked for, burned every bridge back to his old life. For her. Hannah was running before she'd made a conscious decision to move. She ran through the streets of Seattle, dodging pedestrians, ignoring the rain that had started to fall. She ran to Columbia Center, rode the elevator to the top floor, burst through the doors of Hansyoung Group's offices. He's in Seoul, David Kim said, looking up from his desk. He flew out 2 hours ago. I know, Hannah said breathlessly. I need to get there. I need to tell him. Tell him what? David asked gently. Hannah stopped, her chest heaving. That he's not doing this alone. That if he's fighting for us, then I'm fighting too. That I love him enough to face whatever comes. David smiled and handed her a ticket. He left this for you. Just in case. There's a flight to Seoul in 3 hours. Hannah looked down at the ticket. First class, open-ended return. Her hand shook as she took it. Thank you, she whispered. Thank him, David replied. He never stopped believing you'd come. The flight to Seoul was 14 hours long. Hannah spent most of it alternating between terror and exhilaration, unable to sleep despite the comfortable seat that reclined into a bed. She kept replaying Tae-Yang's press conference, the look of absolute certainty on his face when he'd declared his love for her to the world. She landed at Incheon Airport at dawn, exhausted but running on pure adrenaline. A driver was waiting with a sign bearing her name. The man bowed deeply when she approached. "Miss Brooks," he said in careful English. "Mr. Lee is expecting you. Please come with me." The drive into Seoul was surreal. Hannah had never been to Korea before, had only seen it in movies and photos. The city was enormous, glass towers stretching toward the sky, traditional hanok houses nestled between modern buildings, streets packed with cars and people even at this early hour. The car pulled up in front of an enormous building in Gangnam, Hanseong Group headquarters. Hannah's stomach fluttered with nerves. She was wearing the same clothes she'd worn on the plane. Her hair was a mess, and she probably had dark circles under her eyes from lack of sleep. But none of that mattered. She was here. The driver led her through a private entrance into an elevator that required a keycard to access. They rose swiftly to the top floor, and when the doors opened, Hannah found herself in a sleek office that made Tae-Yang's Seattle space look modest by comparison. And there he was. Tae-Yang stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to her, looking out over Seoul. He was still wearing the suit from the press conference, slightly rumpled now, his shoulders tense. "Tae-Yang," Hannah said softly. He turned, and the expression on his face when he saw her made Hannah's breath catch. Relief, joy, love, all of it visible in that single moment before he crossed the room in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms. "You came," he whispered against her hair. "I was so afraid you wouldn't." "I'm sorry I took so long," Hannah said, holding him tight. "I was scared. Scared of what you'd be giving up. Scared I wasn't worth it. Scared of everything. But then I realized..." She pulled back to look at him. "I realized that my mother taught me to be brave. And that love means fighting for each other, not running away to protect each other from imaginary futures. So I'm here, and I'm staying, no matter what happens." Tae-Yang cupped her face in his hands, his eyes searching hers. "It won't be easy. The board is furious. My mother is barely speaking to me. Half of Korea thinks I'm crazy for choosing you over the company." "And what do you think?" Hannah asked. "I think I'm the sanest I've been in my entire life," Tae-Yang said, and then he kissed her, gentle and fierce all at once, a promise and a claiming and a celebration. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Hannah rested her forehead against his. "So what happens now?" "Now," Tae-Yang said, "we face whatever comes. Together." The next week was a whirlwind. The Korean media couldn't get enough of the story. The powerful chaebol heir who'd chosen love over duty, the American secretary who'd captured his heart. Hannah gave a single interview at Tae-Yang's side, speaking carefully about their relationship, about the moment 20 years ago that had connected them, about their hopes for the future. The response was mixed. Some people found the story romantic, rallying to their side. Others condemned Tae-Yang for abandoning his responsibilities, criticized Hannah for being a foreigner seeking money and status. The comments online were brutal, attacking everything from Hannah's appearance to her lack of education. "Don't read them," Tae-Yang advised, gently taking her phone away one evening. They were in his apartment in Seoul, a modern space with minimalist decor and that same spectacular view he seemed to favor. "Nothing good comes from reading comments." "I know," Hannah said, but her voice was small. "It's just hard. They don't even know me, but they've already decided I'm not good enough." "They're wrong," Tae-Yang said firmly, "and eventually, they'll see that." The turning point came from an unexpected source. Tae-Yang's mother requested a meeting with both of them, this time at the Kim family's traditional hanok in an older part of Seoul. Hannah was terrified, remembering their first disastrous meeting in Seattle. They arrived to find not just Soo-jin waiting, but also several older women, aunts and family friends, Hannah gathered. They sat in a traditional room with floor cushions, wearing hanbok, looking like something out of a historical drama. "Sit," Sujin said, gesturing to cushions across from her. Her expression was unreadable. Hannah and Tai Yang sat, their hands linked. Whatever happened, they'd face it together. Sujin studied them for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice quiet but clear. 20 years ago, a young American girl saved my husband's life. She asked for nothing in return. She simply helped because it was the right thing to do. She paused. My husband never forgot her. He talked about her kindness, about the way she stayed calm in a crisis, about how she represented the best of what people could be. He spent years trying to find her, to thank her properly. He died never knowing what happened to her. Sujin's eyes met Hannah's. And now I find out that the girl who saved my husband is the woman my son loves. That the kindness shown to us 2 decades ago has come full circle. Mrs. Kim, Hannah began, but Sujin held up a hand. I have been unfair to you, she said, and the admission clearly cost her something. I judged you based on what you lacked rather than what you are. I let tradition and fear blind me to what my son sees clearly, that you are exactly the partner he needs. Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. I'm not finished, Sujin said, but there was a hint of warmth in her voice now. If you are to be part of this family, you must understand our ways. You must learn our language, our customs, our traditions. It will not be easy. I'm willing to learn, Hannah said. I want to understand Tai Yang's heritage, to be able to honor his father's memory properly. One of the aunts spoke up in Korean, and Sujin translated. She says you have good manners and a respectful way of speaking. These things can be taught, but the heart behind them cannot. The meeting lasted 2 hours, ending with Sujin agreeing to help Hannah learn about Korean culture and traditions. It wasn't full acceptance, not yet, but it was a beginning. As they left, Sujin touched Hannah's arm. My husband would be happy, she said softly. That the girl he always wanted to thank is now part of our family. He would say it was fate. Maybe it was, Hannah replied. The battle with the board took longer to resolve. For 3 months, Tae Yang fought to maintain his position while refusing to end his relationship with Hannah. The board split. Some members supported him, others demanded his removal. The standoff seemed impossible to break, until David Kim uncovered something interesting. One of the board members most vocal against Tae Yang, a man named Park Jin-soo, had been systematically embezzling company funds for years. The evidence was damning, and Park's immediate resignation shifted the board's balance of power. With Park gone, Tae Yang's remaining supporters were able to push through a compromise. Tae Yang would remain as heir apparent, but he would need to prove himself over the next year, demonstrating that his personal choices didn't impact his professional competence. It's not perfect, Tae Yang admitted to Hannah. They're still watching every move I make, waiting for me to fail. Then we won't fail, Hannah said simply. She threw herself into learning Korean, studying for hours each day. Sujin connected her with a tutor, and Hannah practiced constantly. She learned about Korean business etiquette, about the proper way to bow to elders, about the complex social hierarchies that governed interactions. 6 months after their reunion, Hannah was conversational in Korean. Not fluent, not yet, but able to hold basic conversations and understand business discussions. She attended company events at Tae Yang's side, carefully observing and learning, making an effort to connect with the wives of executives and board members. Slowly, opinions began to shift. People saw how hard she was working, how seriously she took her role in Tae Yang's life. They saw the way he seemed happier, more balanced, more engaged with both the business and the people around him. She's good for him, Hannah overheard one board member tell another at a company gala. I didn't think an American would understand our ways, but she's trying. That counts for something. 1 year after that first press conference, Tae Yang called a board meeting. Hannah waited outside, her stomach in knots. This was the moment that would determine their future, whether the board would accept Tae Yang's leadership or force him out. 3 hours later, the conference room doors opened. Tae Yang emerged, and the smile on his face told Hannah everything she needed to know. It's official, he said, pulling her into his arms. I'm staying. They've approved my position as chairman-to-be. Hannah felt tears of relief streaming down her face. You did it. We did it. We did, Tae-yang agreed. And then, right there in the hallway with half the board watching, he dropped to one knee and pulled out a small box. Hannah Brooks, he said, his voice clear and strong. You saved my father 20 years ago. You saved me when I'd forgotten how to really live. You fought beside me, learned a new language and culture, faced criticism and judgment, all because you believed in us. He opened the box, revealing a ring, a simple diamond set in platinum, elegant and timeless. Will you marry me? Hannah was crying too hard to speak. She nodded frantically, and Tae-yang laughed as he slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, lifting her off her feet in a spinning embrace. The board members watching broke into applause. Even Soo-jin, standing at the back of the crowd, was smiling. The wedding took place 6 months later, in the spring. They held 2 ceremonies, one traditional Korean in Seoul, where Hannah wore a hanbok and performed the formal bows to Tae-yang's family, and one Western ceremony in Seattle, where Hannah's nephew walked her down the aisle, and her old colleagues from Sterling and Associates filled the pews. At the Seoul ceremony, Soo-jin presented Hannah with a necklace that had belonged to Tae-yang's grandmother. You are family now, she said simply. And the warmth in her eyes said what her words didn't, that Hannah had earned her respect and affection. At the Seattle ceremony, Hannah stood with Tae-yang under an arch of flowers, looking out at the faces of everyone who had supported them through the journey. I have my own vows, she said, looking at Tae-yang. I promise to learn from you, to grow with you, to build a life that honors both our cultures. I promise to be your partner in everything, in business, in family, in the quiet moments that make life worth living. And I promise to never stop being the girl who knows how to call 911. The crowd laughed, and Tae-yang's eyes shone with unshed tears. And I promise, he said, to always see you, not as my secretary, not as my wife, not as any role, but as Hannah. The brave girl who stopped to help a stranger, the woman who taught me what really matters, my best friend, my love, my home. They kissed as the sun set over Seattle, and Hannah thought about the strange path that had brought them here. From a street corner in Portland to an unjust firing to a penthouse in Seoul, none of it had been the life she'd planned. But it was the life she'd chosen, and it was perfect. 5 years later, Hannah stood in the nursery of their home in Seoul, a house that blended Korean and Western styles with traditional sliding doors alongside modern appliances, Hanok-inspired roof lines, and contemporary furniture. She was holding their daughter, Yuna, who was just learning to walk. The baby girl had Tae-yang's dark eyes and Hannah's smile, and she babbled happily as Hannah carried her to the window. Look, Hannah said in Korean, pointing. Appa is coming. Tae-yang's car was pulling up the drive. He'd been at the office, but he always came home for dinner now, refusing to be the kind of father who was never there. He'd learned that from his own father's heart attack, that all the success in the world meant nothing if you missed the important moments. As Hannah watched him get out of the car and look up at the window, catching sight of them and breaking into a smile, she thought about fate and choice, about how sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could ripple through time in unexpected ways. She'd stopped to help a stranger when she was 12. She'd never imagined where that simple choice would lead, to love, to family, to a life beyond anything she'd dreamed. Tae-yang came through the door moments later, scooping Yuna into his arms and pressing a kiss to Hannah's forehead. How was your day? He asked. Perfect, Hannah replied, leaning into him. Just perfect. And it was. But life had one more surprise waiting for them. 2 weeks later, Hannah received a letter. It was addressed in shaky handwriting to The Kind Girl from Portland, sent care of Hanseong Group. Inside was a note from an elderly woman named Margaret Chen. 20 years ago, the letter read, I was walking behind a man who collapsed on the street. I watched a brave young girl stop to help him, calling 911 and staying with him until help arrived. I never forgot her kindness. I recently saw you on the news and realized you were that girl. I wanted to tell you that your mother would be so proud of who you've become. Hannah's hands trembled as she read the words. Margaret had included her phone number, and that evening, Hannah called her.
"Your mother and I worked together at the diner," Margaret explained, her voice warm over the phone. "She talked about you all the time, about how you'd stopped to help that Korean man and his son. She was so proud of your compassion. She said you had the kind of heart that would change lives." "I miss her so much," Hannah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She's watching over you," Margaret said gently, "and she's smiling."
Because her daughter didn't just save one life that day, she saved her own future too. When Hannah told Tai Yang about the call, he pulled her close, understanding the significance without words. That weekend, they flew to Portland together with baby Yuna. They visited Hannah's mother's grave, where Tai Yang laid flowers and bowed deeply in the Korean tradition. "Thank you," he said quietly to the headstone, speaking in English so Hannah's mother would understand. "Thank you for raising a daughter who showed a scared boy that kindness still exists in the world. Thank you for teaching her to stop and help, even when it would have been easier to walk by. Everything good in my life exists because of what you taught her." Hannah knelt beside him, one hand on her mother's gravestone, the other holding Yuna. "I hope you can see this, Mom. I hope you know that the kindness you taught me came back to me, that the boy I helped found me again, that we built something beautiful together." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of roses from a nearby garden. And for just a moment, Hannah felt her mother's presence, felt her approval, felt her love reaching across the years. Back in Seoul, life continued to unfold in unexpected ways. Tai Yang's leadership of Hanseong Group brought innovation and compassion to the company culture. He implemented programs for employee wellness, created scholarships for underprivileged students, and established a foundation in his father's name that helped families facing medical emergencies, just like the one that had almost taken his father from him. Hannah became actively involved in the foundation, using her experience and empathy to connect with families in crisis. She never forgot what it felt like to be the one struggling, to be the one facing impossible choices. And she made sure that every family they helped knew they weren't alone. Their story became something of a legend in Seoul, the chaebol who chose love over duty, the American secretary who proved that kindness transcends culture and class. Young people pointed to them as proof that real love was worth fighting for. Business students studied Tai Yang's leadership style, which balanced traditional Korean values with progressive Western ideas. But to Hannah and Tai Yang, they were simply a family. A family built on an act of kindness 2 decades ago, strengthened through trials and judgment, and sealed with a love that had overcome every obstacle placed in its path. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Tai Yang surprised Hannah with a trip back to that street corner in Portland, the exact spot where everything had begun. They stood there together, Yuna on Tai Yang's shoulders, looking at the ordinary sidewalk that had been the setting for an extraordinary moment. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd walked by that day?" Tai Yang asked. Hannah smiled, taking his hand. "I don't wonder, because my mother taught me that we're defined by the choices we make when no one's watching. And I chose to stop. I chose to help. And that choice brought me here, to you, to our daughter, to this beautiful life we've built. I'm grateful every day," Tai Yang said, "that a 12-year-old girl was brave enough to help a stranger, that she grew into a woman brave enough to fight for love, that she chose me, even when it would have been easier to walk away." They kissed there on that Portland street corner, their daughter giggling above them, passers-by smiling at the clearly in love couple. And Hannah knew with absolute certainty that every challenge they'd faced had been worth it, because this family, this love, this life, was what happened when you chose kindness. When you chose to stop and help, even when it was hard. When you chose love over fear, courage over comfort, hope over cynicism. Their story wasn't just about a secretary and a chaebol. It was about the ripple effects of compassion, about how one small act could echo through the years and change everything. It was about second chances and faith and the beautiful, messy, miraculous way that life could surprise you. And it all started with a girl who stopped to help. But fate had one final revelation waiting. 3 months after their Portland visit, Hannah was going through old boxes in her mother's storage unit. the last item she'd never had the courage to sort through. At the bottom of a dusty container, she found her mother's old journal. The entry dated 20 years ago made Hannah's breath catch. Hannah came home today and told me she helped a man who collapsed on the street, a Korean man with his teenage son. She said the boy was so scared, couldn't speak much English, and she held his hand until the ambulance came. My brave girl. She has no idea that man left an envelope with our neighbor before the ambulance took him away. Inside was $5,000 cash and a note in broken English. Thank you for daughter kindness, for her college fund. Please accept. I could never find him to return it, so I put it in a college savings account for Hannah. The money grew over the years, but she never needed it. She insisted on working instead of university. The account still sits there, waiting. Maybe one day she'll understand that the kindness she gave came back to her, even when she didn't know it. Hannah's hands trembled as she read the account number. She checked online. The account her mother had opened had grown to over $47,000 with interest over 20 years. Taeyang's father had tried to thank her, had left money for her education, had made sure his gratitude reached her family, even if Hannah herself never knew. When Hannah showed Taeyang the journal entry that evening, tears streamed down his face. My father told me he left something with your neighbor. I was 15. I didn't understand. He said the girl's mother would know what to do with it. That kind people always honored kindness. He was right, Hannah whispered, holding the journal to her chest. My mother put it away for my future. For our future. She protected his gift until the moment we'd need to understand its meaning. They used the money to expand the foundation, creating a scholarship specifically for young people who demonstrated extraordinary kindness. Teenagers who stopped to help strangers, who chose compassion over convenience, who embodied the values that had brought Hannah and Taeyang together. The first scholarship recipient was a 16-year-old girl from Portland who had saved a child from drowning. At the award ceremony, Hannah told their story, all of it. About the 12-year-old who called 911, about the money left behind, about the love that grew from that single moment of choosing to care. Kindness is never wasted, Hannah said to the audience, Taeyang standing beside her, Yuna in his arms. It echoes through time in ways we can't imagine. It comes back to us in forms we don't expect. And sometimes, it brings us everything we never knew we needed. The crowd rose in a standing ovation, and somewhere, Hannah felt certain her mother and Taeyang's father were smiling, knowing that the seed they'd planted 20 years ago had blossomed into something beautiful beyond measure. What do you think? Did Hannah make the right choice in pursuing a relationship with Taeyang despite all the obstacles? Share your thoughts in the comments below. How would you rate this story from 0 to 10? If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring narratives like this. And check out more heartwarming tales by clicking on the end screen. Thank you for being part of this journey with us.